I bought the cheapest colour pencils I could find to see if my art style is still achievable. I've been using Faber-Castell Polychromos forever and I always recommend them. The only problem is they're getting very expensive, so today I'm going to see if I'm getting my money's worth. To keep it super simple, I'm going to be drawing a skull. It helps that the texture is kind of the same across the entire object. I'll be splitting it down the middle, so one half for the Polychromos and then the other half for the cheaper alternative. These are the colour pencils that I picked up yesterday. They set me back £4 Great British pounds. They have actually quite a lot of different colours, which is why I picked them up. This is really good for the price, 24 for £4. So for reference, Faber-Castell pencil just on its own costs me £2.80, which is actually crazy. And while I still swear by the Polychromos, I do think there is room, if you are a beginner artist, to start with something cheap to see if you enjoy the medium, to practice rendering, to practice shading, just to practice drawing in general. And it's a cost-effective way of doing so, because colour pencils in general can run out quite quickly, especially if you're using a lot of pressure on the paper. And then of course, once you get comfortable with the medium, you can maybe look at investing in some Polychromos and taking out a mortgage. So here I have the loose sketch of my skull. I actually have my palette sorted out for my Polychromos already. This is the usual colours I use for my style. I want to use the cheap alternatives first. So on first glance, these look like really nice pencils, considering the price. Get my palette of Polychromos and then match them up so I know I'm using roughly the same colour, so it's a fair test. So that looks like a similar palette to the Polychromos. I'm happy with that. Let's begin these. Also, a cute little thing. You can actually etch your name onto these colour pencils, which is quite cool. Okay, to begin with, how I usually draw in my style is I start off with like the lightest pencil I have in my palette. So at the moment it's this. I will start by blocking in all the shadows, and since I'm on white paper, I can just leave out highlights as I can let them come through from the actual colour of the paper. So we don't have to worry about highlights or using a white pencil. And then hopefully we can layer some more, and already this feels very plasticky. There's definitely some colour coming out there. I'm having to press quite hard to get any saturation out from the actual pencil itself. And what I normally do, rather than shading like this, I normally shade by doing directional one-line strokes, one after the other, really close by each other, like that. Now, rather than doing all of the shadows at once in this specific pencil, I think I'm just going to do a section for now so I can get a real good feel for how some of these are going to interact with each other. I mean, it's not bad, it's just really light. It's so funny because what's on here is a completely different colour to what is on the nib. So I know this is quite different to my normal videos, but I thought I would try and do a less edited version so you could see a bit into my process, but also I get to see if Polychromos are worth it, because they are draining my bank account. And I didn't always used to use Polychromos. I can't remember the brand, but they were a lot cheaper. In fact, Faber-Castell had a lot cheaper colour pencils anyway before, and now it's a bit ridiculous. But I do think they're worth investing in if you feel like you want to get good at this medium. Of course, you have to practice and not worry about your tools too much to begin with. I would worry about actually drawing, and if I took my own advice, this skull would be a bit more symmetrical and less wonky, but we're just freeballing it today. I don't mind too much. Okay, I'm just going to add in a second colour. So once I've got this sort of layer down, I'd like to add in some blues. Just really want to see how this interacts here. Okay, that's a bit darker. That's a good start. These aren't too bad, you know. They're just really light. They're not as saturated as the Faber-Castell Polychromos. I do think we're getting some depth and some form from these, which is all that matters, to be honest. I mean, Polychromos are creamy, very well saturated. They work great on multiple surfaces, but as long as we can get the form out and some of the rendering details to make this actually look a bit more 3D, then we've kind of accomplished what we're trying to do there. I do like to keep the pencils in my hand that I'm using and just keep swapping in and out on different sections. If you're enjoying this type of video at the moment, I know it's a bit more slower paced, but make sure you drop a like. Consider subscribing if you like art videos like this. I'm normally drawing in my sketchbook or drawing a huge colour pencil piece. That's my usual go-to, and that's something I love doing. I love this medium, and it's such a shame that I've never tried out different colour pencil brands, and I'm not entirely sure what this brand is. I've never seen it before, but that doesn't matter. I mean, for £4, I'm getting some pretty decent results at the moment. I was actually quite apprehensive if this video was gonna make sense. Let's just do some outlines here. See how crispy we can get these lines. I do like to add different coloured lines as well going around. They blend into each other. I mean, these aren't actually that bad. I thought these were gonna be awful. I didn't think they were gonna have any saturation in them. So this orangey pinky colour is essentially going to be my lightest shadows on the drawing. I'm using a reference photo of my skull at the moment, which you saw in the intro of the video. Just taking a picture with half and half lighting, so each lighting and shadow is basically the same on each side. These are going to be my lightest shadows here. There's a really dark shadow here. If I add some more pressure there, add in a bit of blue. If you're interested in how to colour pencil in my style, I've done a previous video on that, which I'll drop above right now. It's essentially going through my process and how I use Faber-Castell Polychromos. But I think this video also serves as a sort of tutorial on how I'm colouring, while also experimenting with a cheaper alternative. Right, I'm just going to have to colour that all in blue, I think. So it's basically the same shadow, only slightly lighter. If I add some more pressure here, there's a real dark shadow here. So when I do that, when I get to the edges of the shadow, I start releasing the pressure a little bit more, almost like a gradient. Think of shadows and stuff, and light as a gradient. You start to understand how and when to release more pressure. And I know I talk about pressure all the time, but I think if I can make it work with really cheap colour pencils, and I mean these are the cheapest I could find. Did find some other ones that were cheap in my local art shop, but to be honest, they're still pretty expensive for what I was needing. And I found these for £4 for 24, which I think is an absolute bargain. And my hope is that you see this. I know some people might come on my channel and think I would like to make colour pencil drawings like that as well, but I can't afford Faber-Castell Polychromos. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't need to get Faber-Castell Polychromos just yet. You can actually pay very little money, get similar results. They might look the same in terms of the actual true colour in real life, or the true saturation, but I'll be damned, that's very close. So I'm just going to add a pink to this now. This pink should be a darker tone than the blue, so let's see. I do need to darken this up a lot more, and it layers quite nicely. That's sitting quite nice. This is actually kind of acting how the Faber-Castells would. They're just less creamy and less smooth. They seem a little bit more jagged. I know people have done this on YouTube before, and the professional pencil sets have always done really well. But I do think if you master something, I think you can kind of draw blood from a stone here. It's definitely, I think we're going to see the difference once I add the Faber-Castell Polychromos in. I need a counter for how many times I've said that. It's just slowly building up these shadows. All we're doing really is making the shadows on the image. So I'm just looking at my reference, making sure I'm putting all these shadows in, sometimes blurring my eye so the image in front of me becomes simpler and I can see it for just the tones and not necessarily the details and the structure of the skull. This is why I think a skull is great to practice on, because it is at the same material or texture, if you will, throughout the whole object. And since colour pencils give off a smooth vibe, very nice to do a skull. I'm struggling here a bit. I need to add a lot more shadow here, so I'm just going to press a little bit harder, darken this shadow up to the bottom. Essentially all of this eye socket is a shadow, and as it bleeds out of the, because these bits pop up a little bit more, there's a gradient effect. So maybe this line here is too harsh of a shadow, but I do like putting harsh shadow lines in my work, and this is trying to see if I can replicate my style in the same manner. And I know I said I do single strokes, but for the sake of time, I think colouring like this every now and then isn't such a big deal. I think I want this to look sketchy anyway. But so far, this is turning out quite nice. I'm almost running out of things to say because I did not expect them to be actually this good. I mean, the feel of the pencils and the feel of them in your hand, I actually do prefer the feel of Polychromos, but because they're like a cylinder, they're fully like a circle. They do get a bit sweaty in my hands and a bit, the grip loosens a bit. But these, hexagonal, I think that's how you say it, so I can get like a firmer grip, which as it's hot at the moment, it's very useful and I appreciate it. You'll just see where I'm leaving the highlights out and start to see a slight bit of form building up and depth for this skull here. I mean, it's really dark over here, so I'm not going to be afraid to press a little bit harder. As we've already figured out, we can layer stuff over the top, so these pencils are going to hold up in terms of pressing as hard as you need to without ripping the paper. I'm just trying to see everything in blocks, essentially. Everything's really blocky in my mind. I'm just trying to shadow really specific details, colour, and I really do think I should not do a harsh shadow line there. There is an ultra dark shadow on the lip of this eye socket. Shadow on the brow pulls towards us. If the lighting's coming from the top here and the brow points towards us, then that's going to create a shadow. And yeah, I thought I would have a plethora of things to talk about while I was drawing this. And this is the first time I've actually drawn and talked at the same time. Normally I do a voiceover after the fact, do a bit of reflecting on the artwork I've just made, but it's actually nice to go through play by play, understand and talk about what I'm using. But I thought there would be a million problems with these and I would have a lot to talk about because they were so bad, but I guess I need to not judge things by their price. It's funny that when you see something that's a bit more expensive, we do attach a bit of luxury or it's premium, but realistically there must be minor differences in these colour pencils because they're doing a cracking job. Add some more pinks around here. There's a really dark shadow here because it gets deep in here. And don't be concerned about how I'm holding my pencil. I know it looks horrible, I promise you, I'm fine. This is probably the better way to hold it. But ever since I was a child, this is how I've held it naturally. And I will pay dearly for the pain. So if you actually like this sort of style of video where I'm talking while drawing in real time, please let me know in the comments below. I'll definitely do more, and maybe I can do a bit more of a tutorial style on what it is I'm doing, how I pick my reference photos, how I pick a composition, where the idea comes from, all of that good process stuff. I mean, as this is quite a big surface area, there's a lot of light that kind of leaks into these top areas here from the light source, but it's dark here, so I do want to keep some lightness here. I am trying to replicate this as realistically as I can, but just using colours that wouldn't necessarily reflect real life, but that's better. If we add this dark shadow here because it goes all the way to the bottom, then we get more depth on this line up here. I mean, it does look very iridescent. It's something I really like about my style at the moment. I love creating what seems to be a colourful harmony of colours, but they all work together in a nice way. They don't feel oddly placed. I need to add the blue here because this is my, essentially if we have the lightest shadow being the pink, so that's number 1 lightest shadow, then we have number 2 lightest shadow, which is the blue, and then we have 3 medium shadow, which is the pink, and then we'll have 4 medium shadow, which will be this darker blue, and then we'll have like the darkest darks, which will be these 2 extremely dark pencils, and then I'll add some like flares around the highlights from the light green and the yellow we have. I mean, the only criticism I have at the moment is they're a lot harder to get on the page than say the Polychromos, so I wonder if it would take me longer to draw a full piece with these versus the Polychromos. Well, I suppose I can check the time recorded. These do seem like they're taking a little bit longer, but I still feel I'm getting very similar results, and I know this might not work for some of you that might want to draw in a realistic way with realistic colours and render in a certain way with realistic portraits or such, which is an often popular use of colour pencils, but I don't think you need all of those skin tone colour pencils to make nice artwork. I mean, actually, no knock to anyone that's doing that, I just mean I don't think you need that many colour pencils in your toolbox to achieve beautiful artwork. The forms kind of coming together. I think I do need to start etching some harsher shadow lines because I need some of the highlights to pop a little bit more, and this pink is very close to the white unless I press harder, so maybe I'll press harder on some certain areas. So let's add in the darker blue, see where this gets us. So we do have a dark shadow here. See how it layers quite easily? I mean, for £4, can't go wrong with here. If you want an entry-level pencil, look for the cheaper ones, and it's worth it to practice. I think this is what I'm coming to the conclusion of, is if I was to use colour pencils for the first time, or I'm interested in using them, and I figure out, okay, I want to practice drawing, but not only that, I want to practice rendering, practice the form, the shapes, values. I think a pack like this, pretty inexpensive, would do you well. Build up the confidence to get good at it, start drawing the things you like. And also, if you bought Faber-Castell Polychromos and they're expensive, and then you feel like you have to look after them so much, and then you might not want to use them as often because you don't want to waste them, so you're not experimenting as often, you're not practicing as often, and you're saving it. So I think practice with these. You can invest in those Faber-Castell Polychromos or Prismacolors, but I do not have access to Prismacolors in the UK as much as Faber-Castell. They're like the go-to colour pencils that we have in even like the normal art shops, so they're like the premium that I pay for and have been using for a while now. I mean, it's definitely taken me longer. I would have filled this whole section up, I think, by now. I need to add some more pink. It's starting to look a little bit too blue. A light area around there where the light is bouncing off. Back into the skull, inside the socket. Right, there is a sharp shadow there, so I'm just going to add a line there. It's funny because I don't want people to feel on my videos intimidated by colour pencils. I think they're a really practical medium. I think anyone can be good at colour pencils. It's just colourful drawing, isn't it? I'm just going to add the darkest blue here. as well as the darkest purple, just so you can get a quick idea of how dark we can get these shadows. So my darkest areas will actually be here still. As you can see, I've been working them for some time now, just like that. That looks like a more navy purple than it does a blue, but it's still nice. As I'm coming further away from the darkest point, still using this colour, my pressure with the pencil is lightening, so it creates a gradient going upwards. Stop using pressure as much here. Lighter, 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 lighter. I mean, this is looking pretty good. I'm really pleased with this. I really wanted this video to be like, look, you don't need Faber-Castell Polychromos. Like, I love using them, but you absolutely do not need the top of the range colour pencils to colour in. And even to prove to myself, to be honest, I think I'm pretty stuck at buying them now. Anyone learning to use colour pencils, go grab yourself a cheap pack, grab your sketchbook and get learning. This is fun. Right, there is. I'm gonna add a little detail here, but I'm first gonna add it in the dark blue so it's not too dark. There's actually a crack through here, so just to add a little sense of realism. Do the crack going down, there we go. And then it would be darker in here because it's inside the shadow line. I feel like it's just a constant recycling of the same colours going over each other. Get a sense of what shadows should be darker, looking at your reference. I can afford to lightly go over some of the highlights because once I've added all of the shadows in, they're still going to appear as highlights because this is the lightest colour. So I actually get the desired effect I want anyway. I'll show you what I mean with adding pops of colour along the lines of the highlights and the shadows. So where my lightest shadow ends here, this area is all highlights for me. So I like to put a really like sharp line like that along the highlights to kind of give the highlight area a bit more visibility. And then you get this beautiful thing where, see, this is a really saturated yellow actually, and then it actually comes through really nicely against all the other kind of muted colours. It's a nice stylisation, and I'll do the same with the green. Add some along here. This is quite muted actually, so I'm actually not going to use this one because this doesn't work as well as the yellow. It's a lot darker in contrast, so I just wanted the brightness from the yellow to pop. Right, I think I've said all I need to say on these pencils for now. I will gather my thoughts for the end of the video once both of these are done, and I'll come back to you once we are back onto the Faber-Castell Polychromos. Do sort of a time lapse for the rest of the video. As you can already see, I'm building up an image here. I'm just going to replicate what I've done here on the rest of the drawing, and any questions, pop them in the comments below, and I'll put some music on now so you can vibe out while I colour the rest of this in. after using them for about 20 minutes. I've definitely got used to how they layer and the types of saturation I can draw from the colour pencil. Really actually quite happy with how this has turned out. Pretty much at the end of this section now. I'm not going to do the teeth. I thought it'd be cooler if I just did outlines of them so you can see that teeth are there. This feels very similar to my actual style, so excited to see how the Faber-Castell Polychromos match up. And I don't know why I keep saying them by their full government name, but they are Faber-Castell Polychromos if you didn't hear the first time. I've managed to shade and build up quite a lot of form with these, and I found that actually using the pencil like this has been a lot better rather than doing them stroke by stroke. But for the lighter areas, it's definitely better to do stroke by stroke, sorry. I think I'm just gonna darken this area up a bit more again, make it more circular. So a good tip when drawing, if you do single strokes that are in directions, the actual form would go over. So for example, if you had a circle, and rather than just flat colouring it in like that, if you had a circle like this and you shaded it like this, it actually looks more like a sphere than just a flat circle. So that's what I try and think of when thinking of the skull and looking at my reference. What direction is this on a 3D landscape kind of going in? So you've kind of got to think in 4D almost. So this would be going back in. If there's a big highlight, then it's obviously protruding outwards, depending on where the light source is coming from, of course. But yeah, alternatively, you could just do different directions, so it looks really sketchy. This is obviously the first time I've used these, and not just for the video. I've never opened these before. You've seen me open them. I'm really impressed by these, and I'm managing to get a lot of dark shadows here. This whole area needs darkening up, so I'm just going to go over the whole thing. And I might add that blue back in. But let me know what you guys think. If you use colour pencils yourself, what kind of brand of colour pencils do you use? I know everyone probably has their own personal preference and what they got used to when they first started. But if you are a new viewer or a new artist and you're just starting out and you're wondering if it's worth investing, let me tell you, it's not worth investing just yet until you feel comfortable with the ones, the cheaper ones especially. Get those first, and I'll reiterate this again. Get those first, practice a lot, practice your shading, practice form, practice actually drawing to a good standard and understanding the fundamentals, perspective, shape, and then you can move on to this. But I think there is the first half using the cheapest colour pencils I could find, GIOTTO. I've never heard of this company before. They might actually be the GOAT. Look, these are obviously meant for like school colour pencils. I think a cheap alternative for teachers to buy, so they've got a lot in stock. I think it's time now to move on to the next part of the drawing, using the famous Polychromos. And now we're on to the Polychromo section. What I'm going to be doing is the exact same process as what I've just done. So I'll begin to start off with my shadow areas, leaving the highlights to do their thing. And I can say, although the other ones were great, already I don't have to apply much pressure to get much pigmentation out of the actual pencil itself. They do feel a lot quicker to use, a lot smoother. In the end, I think we're going to get roughly a similar result, and you'll find that with the lightest colour that I used on this side, I wasn't actually able to get much darkness out of the colour. With just this really light beige colour for the Faber-Castell Polychromos, I'm able to draw out quite a lot of darkness here with varying amounts of pressure. So I'll just begin to load up my shadows. I start to add a little bit of blue in. I don't know if it's just I'm used to this, but what they do just feel so much smoother when you're using them. Blend really nicely. But then again, I'm looking at that and that's blended nicely as well. It just took me a longer time. So I suppose it depends what you value. I mean, I sit down to do art and I don't really mind how long it takes me. It's more the process and the journey that I fall in love with, and switching off for a second. Well, a few hours. I suppose if you want to work faster, professional colour pencils might be more desirable to you. Again, I'm just only working the shadows. I'm not really worried about the highlights. There's nothing I can do to them anyway. There's no brighter pencil than the white paper. And if anyone from Faber-Castell is watching, which I highly doubt they are, why have I got no sponsor yet? If you sent me some pencils, that would be great. Well, hey, send me some Polychromos so I can review and then give it to an audience member, because I don't need that many. I only use around 6 or 7 pencils in my style, and I'm happy using those. I don't need the full range that they offer. It's too much. I'm going to play some music again and time lapse through this, and then I'll talk to you once I've finished this, and then we'll talk about the differences. See you soon. Okay, now we have finished up with both the sets of colour pencils. I think we have a clear winner, but I think we have to give credit to the cheap ones. They have managed to do my style. I think they've completed the challenge. The Polychromos are a lot more saturated and the pigment just comes out a lot more, which you can visibly see. I feel like the colour that it actually looks like on the pencil is what comes out of the pencil, whereas cheaper ones, I wasn't expecting some of the dark blue to actually look like that. It's more purple when it's applied to paper. Yeah, I think I'm just able to get more a range of shadows and contrast using Polychromos, which is great. And like I said before, if you're a beginner artist or you're wanting to try colour pencils out, I really do implore you to try out cheaper versions first and then move on to Polychromos, because while the results different, I don't think they vary that much. It's just the pigment of the colour. I think I was able to do this quicker, the Polychromos, but I think that's just because I'm used to them and I was learning how to use the other ones in a way that could replicate my style. But in terms of replicating my style, I think they have done that and they've won in that regard. Guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I'm super impressed with how this turned out. You absolutely do not need the most expensive colour pencils to make beautiful drawings. I believe in you. You can do it with the cheaper alternatives. And I think, to be honest, this is proof. Go practice, go experiment with cheap colour pencils, and let me know how you get on. If you want to see a bit about my process and what goes on in my tiny little brain, then make sure you subscribe and comment down below which colour pencils you preferred in this video. Okay, see ya.